but yeah, I'm 24 and I started socially transitioning in 2016. Wait, no, 2014. 2016 is when I started hormones, sorry. So I was 16 when I started my social transition. And that was exactly when I started college because I wanted to kind of ease myself into it. Like I wanted to finish school first and then like have this whole group of new people who didn't know me and I could just be like kind of stealthing, but whether that worked or not, I don't know. It's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. So then I basically spent my 2 college years in this sort of social transition without hormones, and I started a job. I moved out, and I'll talk about my experience with hormones later. But that's when I started hormones, and then 2 years later, I started university, and that was a whole another crazy experience. Is that because before I started university, I wasn't really going out much, and mixing with female friend groups despite being trans. Like I was kind of a loner. So that was like a second eye opener for the female experience. So that's basically my transition timeline. And then I started detransitioning in 2020.
I'm same age as Robin, 24. I identified as trans starting at 15, but I didn't actually like socially transition until maybe a year before I got onto hormones. And I got onto hormones in 2019 when I was 21. Um, but from 15 until about 20, I was one of the more ideological type people. I already I believed that I was already a woman, and I was trying to make that fit as much as possible. That's the messaging that I was getting from the internet circles I was running in, from some of the friends I was with. Um, and and it wasn't fitting because obviously people were not like using my chosen pronouns or whatever, and I was just making myself miserable by trying to like fit myself into this box that didn't make sense. I dressed kind of androgynously. I can't say, but it wasn't like I was trying to look like a woman necessarily. I was just trying to look, I guess, more like a feminine guy, and that worked. But then 20, I started to like actually start to wear like women's clothes and style my hair differently and everything. And then that made me even more miserable because it just highlighted how masculine I actually looked. And then I started taking hormones, 21, and I went to a Planned Parenthood, same as Helena. They prescribed me estrogen immediately. Like they did the blood work, but they didn't look at it before they prescribed me. And the only reason I had to wait at all after that was because the like they didn't have the compounds for it at the pharmacy. So I just waited 2 weeks after I got prescribed, but they didn't care really what the blood work said. It was just a formality. Um, and same thing, they didn't ask me any questions about anything. They were just like, you know, well, actually they did. They did. They asked me like, are you depressed? Like, have you been through some stuff? Like, that kind of thing. And I answered honestly, like, yeah, I'm not well. And they basically took that and said, that's actually, that's a good sign. That's a sign that you are trans and this is right for you. So that's how that went down.
I was
And
really happy when you said they actually asked you questions, but then the answers that you gave that you were depressed were like ammunition to trans you, which is that's pretty insane. But carry on.
yeah, no, I said I had issues with gender. I was suicidal. I had issues with my body image. I had a very unhealthy lifestyle. I was smoking a lot of cigarettes and weed and drinking a lot and living with a cult, but I didn't know it was a cult at the time. But I had mentioned my living situation was not fantastic, and I was kind of living in filth. Um, and they were just like, well, this you sound like a perfect candidate, like that was really the response.
Should we start with why we decided to detransition and then work from there? So
Yeah.
when I started having thoughts about detransition, it was I've been on hormones for 4 years and identifying for 6. So the next step really for me was because I still wasn't a woman, right? But I mean I was doing pretty well. I passed and everything. But the next step for me would have been surgery. So that was when I started looking at surgeries and let me tell you, it was kind of an eye opener, because the way that surgeries are presented in popular culture, I guess it's not really popular culture. I guess it is now. It is now popular, but the way that it was presented was, you get this the functioning genitalia of the opposite sex, but it's not. It's a penile inversion, and it's even worse for the FTM people. But yeah, it was really eye opening to learn that this is nothing like what I expected, and I just kind of realized, I'm not ever going to be a woman. I mean, I can look the part, dress the part, but I'm never going to be one. And I guess from there, I realized that I don't need to be one. But it took a lot of self reflection and um, a good few weeks just shutting myself in my room and being depressed to come out with this conclusion. But yeah, it was really the surgeries were the first big eye opener for me. Actually, doing my own research about that.
It was the same for me. That was when well, I'm not sure that that was the eye opener that I was like, okay, well maybe trans isn't real. I still somehow thought like I was one of those like because people say like, okay, well maybe it's not right for most, but for some, right?
Right.
And I still even after like realizing like some of this like the whole born in the wrong body thing is not real, like I still thought maybe this would help because I was still very distressed. And looking into the surgeries, well, what happened was I talked to the nurse that was overseeing my treatment, and I told her, listen, the hormones, it's been like a year and a couple months, and I'm not feeling like, there was a honeymoon period, but it seems like it's wearing off, and I feel worse almost. And she was just like, oh well, maybe you should look into surgery in that case if you really want to feel like a woman. And spent months researching it and looking at surgeons. Am I going to go to Sinai? Am I going to go to Michigan? Am I going to, what am I going to do here? And making a plan for like, okay, what do I have to do if I have to drive across the country, whatever. And what snapped me out of it and made me realize, okay, I'm gonna have to detransition because clearly this was a bad idea. Was I had a waking nightmare that I was on the table being operated on and realized, okay, yeah, no shit, this is not gonna
Oh,
work. So
oh my
It,
God.
and it's kind of just the idea of taking perfectly functioning male genitalia and just screwing them up completely. Like a lot of these surgeries, you've got it's really harrowing. I don't want to go into graphic detail about it for the sake of the audience, but you got people who are living with catheters for the rest of their lives. And so during the time that I was trying to live stealth, and I had a habit of wearing jeans. So it's common for MTF people to sort of tuck their genitalia, and that's a very like how we use the word bottom surgery to hide the fact that it's a penile inversion. We'll call it tucking to hide the fact that it's crushing your balls for 24 hours a day. So I actually had complications from tucking where the spermatic cord sort of tied around itself and caused testicular torsion, which basically cuts off the blood supply to the testicle. So I had to have emergency surgery on like one horrible Christmas Eve to get that corrected. Luckily, like if I left it any longer, then I would have lost my appendage, shall we say. So yeah, this is something that's I've never ever seen spoken about on any of the like trans forums, like on the forums that
Wow.
giving advice about how to tuck and why you should tuck and whatever. I've never seen anyone talk about this complication.
I had so it's kind of hard for me to tell at this point, whether it was the medications or whether it was because I was tucking all the time, but I had for a time like very, very painful erections, and creeping erectile dysfunction. But by painful, I mean like the way I would describe it is like a knife, like in your genitals, like genuinely like burning hot, painful, and it is not. It could have been either or, only because when your genitals are in that sort of like super constrained environment, And it's like really warm down there too. It's not. That's a very unnatural position for them to be in.
Find that with wearing like really tight underwear that you're not supposed to be wearing as well,
Yeah.
like a lot of trans males will do.
It could also have been the drugs I was on. It could have been either or, but it like certainly both does not help. So estrogen, I think of the two that I was, because I was on spironolactone or aldactone, as well as estrogen, because for boys you need to suppress testosterone because it's a more powerful drug than estrogen. Spironolactone, estrogen has its own horrible effects on males, but they're longer term. They're not as, it's not as immediate. But for spironolactone, like immediately, like it starts causing issues with your kidneys. It gave me really bad, like I call it brain fog, where like like you can't focus at all, and that's because it's doing damage to your frontal lobe. And they warned me that spironolactone might cause erectile dysfunction, and I was okay with that because I didn't want to have functioning genitalia, which is a horrible, horrible thing that, again, they asked me about, and they were like, "Oh, you're fine with that? Okay, we'll just give it to you then." And I didn't, they didn't warn me that that was part of it. But the one thing that was definitely the drugs was the muscle loss. I had a lot of muscle loss in my shoulders and back. I already have scoliosis because I was obese for a while, and it was just like crushing my spine. And the Spyro made it so much worse, so much worse. It was extremely painful. I could not find a comfortable position to sit in or lie down in. And the actual like physical loss of the muscles was also very painful. I could feel myself getting weaker by the day and just getting tired out so quickly. It was really bad. And estrogen too. Estrogen has sort of a sedative effect a little bit. It really suppresses your energy and makes you super depressed. I was crying maybe at least once a day, usually twice, over really small things. And that never used to happen before. I think since I've detransitioned, I've only cried like one time. When it came to crying while on estrogen, that was a release. That was a huge emotional release. It was very helpful for when I was doing trauma therapy. I was doing EMDR, so a lot of exposure type stuff, and crying helped get it out. Um, but since I've detransitioned, I don't get the urge to cry at all. And at first, I was worried that that was going to make me like super emotionally constipated. I wasn't going to be able to like deal with anything, and I was going to have like angry outbursts or whatever. But that hasn't been true at all. I just channel it through my energy instead, through like all the physical energy that testosterone gives you, and I just go to the gym a lot instead, and it works out fine.
My experience with estrogen was probably atypical because I've always been a very emotional guy, and I suspect that I had an endocrine issue before I started transitioning because I I couldn't grow a mustache until I was 18, as it was. Um, Not a single hair on my chin, and I had like male gynecomastia before I started transition. So and I was already uh, like I was crying every other day, and when on estrogen I was crying every day. So like that's not really much of a difference. But um, yeah, I don't know how much I can comment on this in particular because I feel like I was low T before I started transitioning. But even despite being low testosterone, every testosterone fueled aspect of myself really just disgusted me. So I think we'll get onto the dysphoria aspect in a little bit. But I, I, I really just wanted to rip the testosterone out of my body, no matter how little of it there was. But this, because we were talking about getting on hormones, the reason why I don't know if I had an endocrine issue that would have probably been picked up is because I started my HRT myself. I didn't go through a doctor for the first 2 years. I sort of once I turned 18, I put myself on the waiting list, and I thought, well, I'm on a waiting list, but I've already been identifying and like passing for 2 years, so I'm going to do this myself. I know what I want. I'm going to get it. Sort of mentality. It's as simple as knowing which website you have to go to. There's guides for different countries and shipping costs and how to get it, but I had to use cryptocurrency to get mine, which is if your son is like a tech wizard, then there's no stopping him, really. And a lot of male FTMs are tech wizards. Sorry, MTFs are tech wizards. So, I mean, myself included.
I've seen a lot of that when I detransitioned, I started to see a lot of those like marketed DIY HRT vials, and they're really gross. There's a lot of like pedophilic overtones on the outside of the packaging.
I got mine. That wasn't really a thing yet. It was just like online pharmacies that sold whatever. Like, they'll sell like Ritalin, and they'll sell I don't know, hydroxychloroquine or whatever, fake COVID cure, whatever. But yeah, they also sold. They just sold whatever prescription drug, and it's like a grey market sort of thing. It's not. It depends on the country as to how illegal it is. I think in the UK, as long as you're importing from the UK, it's not illegal. I mean, it's as simple as going on Reddit or 4chan and just typing in "how do I get HRT," and you'll get just a list of websites, all the information you could possibly ever want, how to buy cryptocurrency, which put in your location, it will tell you which pharmacy is the best for you. You know, like infographics and interactive websites and wikis that tell you all about it. I've got this idea in my head that I've come up with like 7 different underlying causes to dysphoria. And I think you and I could go through each one and tell everyone how we've been personally affected by these in our lives and how they apply to us.
Yeah.
We're just listing them all off. So, gender nonconformity. I don't know how or in what way you were gender nonconforming throughout your childhood, but I know for me, I was just like the token puff in class, and I was gay as well. And you know, I could go on for dozens of different stories on how how bad it was, but and how when I went online and I was trying to get help from other people who were in the same position as me, like gay femboys, for lack of a better word, online. Like I went on 4chan, and this at this exact same time as I was going there for support, the whole trans thing was blowing up, and everyone was convincing each other, oh, it's better if we just transition. So that's how like a gender non-conforming person is going to be gaslit into thinking that transition is the solution for them.
For me, I was just really sensitive owing to the autism. I had sensory problems that people just thought like, oh, well, this is just, you're just being a little pussy. And I was at the bottom of the male hierarchy at school because of that. And so I'm not sure that I was like non-conforming in the way that a gay boy would be, but I wasn't able to stick to the social rules generally. And I was a little weird and a little slow socially. I was really like, academically, I was really uh, you know, above and beyond, but as far as like when it came to interacting with kids, it just didn't go well, so.
I was very obviously gender non-conforming, and I'm also 5 feet tall, so that's like a really big factor in my opinion. Is that short guys really don't see the end of it. And like my first nickname at school was midget, and then they realized that I'm also gay and feminine. So that was a field day. That was open season, really.
I must have given off gay vibes because everybody thought I was gay in high school, and then like in college, a bunch of gay guys started hitting on me and everything. So I must have somehow been giving that off, but I don't fully know how.
So this leads us straight into my second point, which is internalized homophobia, which I feel like we've already covered, sort of. I didn't really grow up in a homophobic household, so like I wasn't really ashamed to be gay, but I was sort of gaslit into thinking that transition was the better road for me.
I was ashamed
Internalized.
of being straight. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's a different kind of worms,
yeah,
in my
two
opinion.
different things.
Should we go on to internalized misandry? That's a hot topic
That's the big one.
because it's pretty trendy to talk about how toxic men are, and then you get a gender non-conforming male who really doesn't want to be toxic. Like, for example, they made me play rugby when I was at school, and I hated it so much that I pretended that I didn't know how to read so that I could get extra reading classes during the time that I had PE, and that's not a joke. But like, it's the stereotype that men are toxic, and so we get made fun of for being soft and feminine, and then we get made fun of for being like masculine and toxic. I there's really no escape for boys nowadays, in my opinion.
Yeah. And for me, I just recently posted my whole, I'm sure a lot of people here have seen it or read it. I posted a big long Substack um about my time on Tumblr and being exposed to radical Tumblr feminism. It was essentially just like being attracted to women at all as a man was misogynistic generally. Like if you showed any sort of attraction towards a woman, if you were at all interested in women, if you, I mean, even just existing as a male on the site was very difficult. But to be a straight man especially was really bad. And if you tried to argue with anybody about, oh well, that's not really misogyny, that's just like it's just something boys do sometimes, like manspreading, for instance, like all that kind of thing, or mansplaining, like just trying to point out like, okay, well, sometimes this just happens. It's not necessarily misogynistic every time a man tries to explain something. Um, then yeah, you get people jumping down your throat and telling you all kinds of things. And there were a number of people on Tumblr, and I found this out later after I started dipping my toe into Twitter around this whole issue. Um, there were a lot of feminists that were very pro transitioning males or pro feminizing males because they it blunts the edges, right? It makes you less, it's basically just like castration. And it is castration, but it's like that's why they want to do it, basically, is because it's yeah, because it makes you less of a man essentially, and that's the main thing that they don't want. And I had kind of been absorbing some of that early on because my mom was a big feminist growing up, and kind of had my dad wrapped around her little finger for a long time. So I didn't get to see very many strong male role models. I mean, my dad was a pretty good role model generally, but as far as like, what a masculine man is supposed to do and how he's supposed to carry himself and everything, I didn't get to see that, and a lot of that got called misogynistic generally. So I didn't have you know, I wasn't able to be happy with being a man because I was told it was the worst thing in the world. And what Robin said about getting rid of the testosterone in you, like that's exactly how I felt. I really felt like I was exercising a demon.
I really wanted to escape from manhood with like all of the pressure that was being put on me, because I was so clearly not anything that I was being described, but that was being prescribed to me. But I sort of internalized it, and I thought, yeah, maybe I am a mansplaining, manspreading, um, misogynistic asshole. But I've never thrown a punch in my life. Well, I did. I could hurt a fly. Watch out. Um, I just really wanted to escape all of it, and I was sold this transition idea with some of the points we're going to bring up in a moment, that go into gender dysphoria. You might think, well, how can someone groom you into having a traumatic experience, or how can someone groom you into being autistic or having OCD? But the grooming is really getting groomed into believing that these things, the solution to these things is transition, and that you would be better off transitioning than dealing with these issues in isolation.
One last thing I want to bring up about the internalized misandry, which is specific to the straight boys. I had a lot of what I guess I'll term rape anxiety, in that I was in a long-term relationship with a woman who identified as a lesbian, but I'm pretty sure is bisexual because she was with me for so long. And like we had sex, and it was consensual, but I was because of what I was looking at, and because of what, like, what she was retweeting, what a lot of her friends were reblogging rather, on Tumblr. Like, I got the idea in my head almost every time that we had sex that I was freaking out, like, did I just rape her? Did I just do this? Like, am I that guy? And not every time, but almost every time, she kind of had to calm me down after that. And she was like, no, no, you're not, that didn't happen. You're just, freaking out. But that didn't go away. That never went away. And that was a big, big aspect of it as well. I thought, well, if I transition, then maybe I won't have to deal with these feelings anymore. So, because if I'm a woman, then I can't possibly do anything wrong.
I want to talk about trauma, OCD, and pornography. Um, so I was exposed to really hardcore pornography when I was 9 years old in 2007. Um, and that was my first introduction to what sex was. I had no idea that what women even had between their legs before I saw hardcore porn. I had no idea. I knew that I didn't have a penis, but I didn't know what was there. So that was really horrible for me because that was the only comprehension I had of what of sex, and it completely put me off sex. Like nowadays, I would consider, well, other people would consider me to be an asexual. I don't really like that label because it's kind of loaded, but it, it it wasn't introduced to me by any groomers online either. It was introduced to me by someone at school. So and it was all kinds of different pornography, and then the groomers later on exposed me to some really messed up stuff like fetishes that I don't want to talk about. Just sort of kind of rough, but still kind of vanilla. And I wasn't like into it, but it caused me to become, because this was the first time I'd ever seen a vulva in my life. So it caused me to like hyperfixate on the female genitalia, and some people might describe that as autogynephilia, but it wasn't a sexual experience. It was just like a rumination in my head. It wouldn't. I was just like obsessed with what would it be like to have that instead, Um, and then later on, a couple of years later, it was like the hentai that I kept seeing online, and my groomers would show me that. And by the way, this is for the parents. I wasn't groomed on any adult websites. I was groomed on a Pokemon forum. So this you can't really just block adult websites, and it's okay. So and I'm also a very like libertarian person when it comes to internet freedoms. I think I don't want to like destroy and block the internet and free expression. I just think that you should be aware of who your kids are talking to and where.
I also had my first experience with porn when I was 9. No one actually showed it to me. I was just curious what a woman looked like naked, and I Googled it, and that's what came up. And people were asking about AGP. I'm the resident AGP, I guess, for this webinar, because that was a portion of it. Um, and my first instinct when I saw the pornographic image, it did arouse me even as a 9-year-old, and my first instinct was to get in the same position that she was in. There is no reason for that, right? Like, there's not, like, that's not like a clear, like, it still boggles my mind, like, why that really happened. But the more I have my own theory about what causes AGP, I don't have issues with AGP now. And most of my transition was not sexual. Like, I wasn't like a fetishistic crossdresser or anything like that. I But I did want to take the female role in sexual situations, partially because of my relationship, partially because of my anxiety about being a man. But one of the reasons that, like, I felt like I think there's a relationship between autism and AGP, where, like, something, like, the way that you, like, mirroring behaviors is harder to understand, rather than seeing someone that arouses you and that you're attracted to and thinking, I want to be with this person. It sort of becomes like, I want to be this person, because you have issues with ego formation. There's less of a boundary between yourself and the rest of the world because of how much information you take in at once, right? And yeah, and that's just that's all I really have to say about it. That's sort of how it went down. I know, and the other thing, okay, the last thing I want to mention is that a lot of feminists who talk about this issue really demonize anybody that has AGP at all. And it's hard, like obviously like the really craven perverts out there, and there are a lot of them that are trans, that do groom other people, that do like all kinds of weird sexual shit in public. Like the thing is, like when it comes to like the teenage boys that are going through this, a lot of them sort of aren't, they're not doing it for that reason, right? They're not doing it because they're trying to get off necessarily. Some of them might be, but that's not like at the core of the problem. And I don't think that's even at the core of the problem for some of the adults either. I think it just coupled with like having a mental breakdown and like a total some event that dissolves everything you knew about yourself, and all of a sudden you feel like you have to do something crazy about it. That's how I seem to. That's how I think about it. So.
I think we're going to have to hear a lot more from both of you. No more than Ali, it feels like, you know, you're very important voices that you have so much to say and so much to get out there, so much information that nobody seems to know about. I to be honest, I think porn is really, really part of you know, the kind of the list of issues that is impacting this group of people, of young people. It's just awful. It's just awful how much shame so many young people have in their sexually developing body. Feels like there's something really gone askew.